Well, thank you, Sean. Those two things were indeed not connected. I thank you for this honor, but I have a bone to pick with Isaac Shongwe in particular. About, I think it was February 2005, I got a call from Isaac in Johannesburg saying he wanted to have a meeting. And one thing led to the other, and I allowed myself to be talked into becoming a fellow of what became the Kilimanjaro class of the Africa Leadership Initiative, which then led to a whole series of unfortunate events that has landed me now living in Lagos, Nigeria, which, as a number of my fellow countrymen who are in this room know, is hardly the most pleasant city to live in, but worthwhile in every respect. So I blame Isaac for my finding my way home, and therefore I'm going to get back at Isaac tonight because many of you do not know that Isaac, in the intervening years since he called me in 2005 February, has run off with a true blood princess, has tripled the number of children in our house from 2 to 6. And in fact, they have decided that they are getting married formally in October. He was begging and scraping and groveling a few minutes ago to try and persuade me not to make this announcement, apparently on the basis that I didn't have enough money to entertain the many guests who were sure to show up for the announcement to be made. So I promised him that I will contribute a cow on this day, which, just so you all put it on your calendar, is the 3rd of October. That said, the only other person who will be the object of my affections tonight is Ali Mufuruki, a disgruntled fellow, particularly disgruntled over the last couple of days because everybody has mistaken him for Dele Olojede. I think Caitlin was the first culprit. Caitlin insisted on giving Ali Mufuruki my seminar pack when Ali came in to register a few days ago. And Ali protested that it was not Dele Olojede, but Caitlin was having none of it. And as it so happens, I mean, you know, complete with pictures. This is your picture, we have you. I was also told that last night that Margot Pritzker was telling a story, Ben Ali, as who she had, when she joined my Kilimanjaro class in the bush in South Africa, I think late 2005 or early 2006, it would have been. And of course, Ali Mufuruki was protesting that he is indeed Ali Mufuruki and not Dele Olojede. Apparently, Margot also would have none of it. I raised this Mufuruki issue because this occurs to me that it's very useful in my new line of work, where I have turned myself into a newspaper publisher in Lagos, Nigeria, which is a line of work that opens you up to various kinds of threats, including of bodily harm, and a body double is very useful in such circumstances. So we are publishing this newspaper, and we're on the web and on Twitter, on Facebook, in Lagos. We started live on December 2nd on Twitter, and on December 18th we launched our website, 234next.com, and on January 4th we published our first edition of the printed newspaper, Next. Next month, at the end of next month, we go daily. and we will get on the mobile platform in another 3 months, and so on and so forth. But we decided to pursue this line of work, as I was saying earlier, that the final impetus for me was what was provided by Isaac in manhandling me into the Ali program, which finally gave me the courage to do what I always wanted to do, which was to not only live my long sojourn in New York and around the world, but to go back home to try and see whether there was some way that one could make a dent, my favorite Aspen phrase, in the many challenges that a really beaten down country, long abused by its political and business elite, faces. So our simple proposition is to create a platform that delivers factual, unvarnished, unbiased information to people, and that after we have thus armed them, that they will be able to make better decisions as citizens. And if they choose not to act to improve their own country, then I will have used stronger language, but that will just say that that's their problem. But we want to make it impossible for anyone in that country to claim that they didn't know. That's why we're there. A number of people have asked me over the last few days why we're still in the newspaper business. After all, it took a plump Mexican named Slim to rescue the New York Times recently. And you couldn't give the Boston Globe away for free if you tried. But this, in what David Rubenstein called emerging markets, the opposite is actually true. The printed newspaper is flourishing in many parts of the developing world, in China and in India. India is a particularly extraordinary story. I think in 2006 they added 6,000 new titles in a single year in all languages. So extraordinary growth, including Brazil, South Africa. South Africa launched a new newspaper about 5 years ago and went from 0 to 700,000 copies a day. In Egypt, Al Haram sells about 1 million copies a day. So in most of these countries, in most of these emerging countries, the printed newspaper is doing rather well. And perhaps we might even try and acquire the New York Times at some point in the near future. We knew what environment we were going into. It was going to be extremely difficult. That proved to be an understatement. The system is designed to defeat those who try to do things the right way. So it's a constant battle, which accounts for the color of my hair. And even the basics such as how do we get people who will not take bribes in the course of reporting. We then decided we were not going to go into existing newsrooms, largely, but we're going to get young people coming out of college and train them our way and turn them into journalists our way so that they become nexters in every sense of the word. So we hired a recruitment firm that put stuff on the web for us through which all applicants got in touch, and we had 13,000 applications from young people across our country. And an algorithm that they developed that sifted through this was able to narrow this down to about 1,200 finalists. I had insisted I wanted 50% of them to be women, wanted them to be of all faiths from all corners of the country. And we managed to get that pool of 1,200 whom we then interviewed one by one in 3 cities across the country over many months. And we finally hired 55 of them as our rookie reporters, who then went through quite murderous training regime always underpinned by the idea that our mission is to arm the Nigerian public with truthful, uncorrupted information with which they are supposed to make better decisions as citizens. And so these youngsters, under the guidance of a corps of editors, are now attempting to carry out our mission with great difficulty, but already with very, very high impact. And I think that it's probably not boasting too much if I say to you that we're already considered by far the best and most reliable newspaper in the country. Over the last few months, since we launched the print edition in January, we've done stories of all sorts, including the blowing up for the first time in that country, the Halliburton scandal, in which the oil services company managed to bribe almost the entire Nigerian political elite, including 3 former presidents, all of whom we named in our newspaper for the first and only time that had been done there. We had done stories about a state governor who had come under the impression that the state treasury was his private piggy bank, and he has since sued us for ₦500 million. The case is still in court. We were very excited by being sued, actually, because that meant we could save a lot of marketing money. We've published stories about the Reserve Bank, we call it Central Bank in Nigeria, governor, who was living well ahead of above his means. And we have documented the fact that our legislators are the world's highest paid and the least effective in a language that the public will understand. A national legislator in Nigeria, on average, earns about $2 million a year by the time you put all their allowances and stuff together. So it's basically a feeding frenzy where the Commonwealth is being raped by its political leaders. And we publish this in a way that people understand by cataloging how many police officers or teachers or nurses, how many schoolhouses they could build with the amount of money it cost them to send a single legislator to the federal capital in the interior, called Abuja. Of course, Keith Berwick he has very fond memories of Abuja, having suffered food poisoning, and having had to moderate the entire cabinet of the Nigerian government. We were expecting 25 people, 74 showed up. So it was a great Socratic dialogue that we were having under those circumstances. We have published stories about the oil minister who has vast and continuing interest in the oil business. We've done all of these things that nobody has bothered to do in Nigeria for at least a generation. And so they don't know what to make of us. So there's a lot of pressure points, naturally, that we face. One of the stories we did involved an oil company owned by probably Nigeria's richest business tycoon, who had just forgotten to pay taxes for the past 5 years, and by his own admission was owing the tax authorities $600 million. The tax authorities then, of course, sealed off his headquarters and then issued a press statement saying they had done so. This was actually, in memory, the first time this has happened. If you are very rich and powerful in Nigeria, things like that do not happen to you. So a funny thing happened, of course, when the federal authorities sealed off this guy's premises. Not a single news organization in Nigeria carried this story, except us, because they were all bribed. Not a single one, not a single radio station, newspaper, magazine, television station. It never existed. So this is a country where it is possible for a single individual to actually blank out the federal authorities from the public space. And so when it became clear that we were not going to play along, they pulled all their ads from our paper and from our website, and we said we were so sorry that things came to that, but we wish them good luck, and we published on our front page the tax dodge to the tune of $600 million. So we're facing these kind of pressures. Of threats of advertising, petty sabotage. I got a call from a former intelligence chief, a retired general, who said, he would like to see me whenever I had a little time. So I took up my managing editor, and we went up to see this former intelligence chief in Abuja. And he was very solicitous, and, I used to know you in the old days. I used to have files this thick on you. I said, I was sure you did, General. And so he said he was always puzzled by this newspaper, that they had looked around and they know I didn't have any money, so who is really behind us? So I said, well, we always published everything. I named all our investors, and the bank that advanced us $10.5 million, whose MD at the time is actually one of our fellows from Ali, West Africa, Jacobs Moyo Ajekigbe, is sitting here somewhere. He took a chance on us. So I said we went to the capital markets and raised money, and I raised some money from friends, and here they are. He said, well, this is a very expensive business, I said, well, I said, no shit, but forgive me. Very expensive business. I said, yes, it is indeed. He said, I had a couple of newspapers myself. We had to close them down because it was too expensive and you didn't make any money from them. I said, that's true. I said, but we think we have the strategy that will turn this into a real business. So he says, well, how can we help you? So I laughed because I understood the language. And so I said, well, General, a man of your stature, the only help you can render us at this time is just to give us your wise counsel and, and wish us well and call us from time to time when you feel like talking. Said, you've served your country for so long and so honorably that we shouldn't be burdening you with anything. Just offer your wise counsel from time to time. So he looked at me and wagged his finger and used a Nigerianism saying, you're a wayo man, which literally means you're a trickster and you don't understand my language and I understand yours. So we get all kinds of calls like this, and we're not getting actual threats of physical harm yet, but that always is the last stage. When they see that you cannot be befriended or bribed or cajoled, you never know what will happen. So a few worried friends have been offering occasionally whether they shouldn't put money together to buy me an armored car to drive around Lagos. Of course, we hope we never go that far. But I find myself now back in my native country after having left under less than auspicious circumstances 22 years ago. I was a young reporter in Lagos then, and we were also sort of crusading and thinking that we could try and change our country. The country, of course, was under a military regime. My editor and close friend was promptly killed via letter bomb on a Sunday morning, October 19, 1986. And I had been away playing squash that morning, and when I came back, found lots of messages. By the time I got to the hospital where they'd taken him, he was already dead. So I asked them to remove the covering. He was lying on a gunny, so I could see the full strength of the devastation of his body. And the one thing that I always remember from all the really horrific scene was that the skin on his left wrist survived the blast where his wristwatch had been. Of course, I became enraged and accused the military leader at the time via a press statement of being behind the murder because we had suspicions that military intelligence was involved. And with that, triggered a whole series of events. Eventually, Richard Joseph, who some of you here may know, I think he still teaches at Northwestern now, used to run the Ford Foundation in West Africa at the time. A few months later, I showed up at my apartment in Lagos with a Lufthansa ticket. I said, "Kid, you're out of here. They're going to kill you if you don't leave the country." So that was how I left for New York in 1987. The plan was to take time off, to cool off, and do graduate study at Columbia University, where I obtained my master's degree. But I could not immediately go back because things were going from bad to worse. We were going from one military regime to another. And so what was supposed to be a one-year break in New York turned into 17 years at Newsday and 20 years in all. And it was at the point after I had managed to retrieve two of my guys that I had sent to cover the war in Iraq after they vanished in Baghdad and were being held in Abu Ghraib prison, that I began to sort of think that maybe I should find a new line of work. But at any rate, I took myself out of the running for the position of editor of the paper, Newsday in New York, and began to make my plan to go back home. But I was profoundly alienated from Nigeria for many years, and even as I resigned from Newsday in December 2004, I could not quite persuade myself to go straight back to Nigeria. So in 2004 late and beginning of 2005, I moved to South Africa, and my family joined me by the end of that year. And that was supposed to be a kind of soft landing while I tried to summon the courage to go back home. So it was during this time that, of course, the diabolical Isaac Shongwe got in touch with me, and I became an Ali Fellow. So in a very real sense, what we are doing in Nigeria today, and which we will be doing in the rest of Africa by the end of next year, is a direct result of my involvement in Ali. It is this family of mine that gave me the courage to go back home. So I suppose age had something to do with it and a host of other things, but I couldn't quite make myself. So maybe I was hearing David White's siren call of intimations of a possible life and the kind of encouragement and the foolish optimism that is required for one to be able to do this kind of work. So my detour in South Africa led to the creation of Next because of Ali. And so back to the intelligence chief's question as to who is really behind us. If I had responded directly to him, I would have said, it's you here in this room. It's the Aspen Global Leadership Network. It's being able to call Shane in Shanghai to put us in touch with newsprint dealers. It's being able to call Eddie in Johannesburg to talk about how we raise money for this thing. It's being able to call Estelle in Accra to explore how we could work with Google on digital platforms. It's being able to fall under the spell of Keith. And a real spell it is. He's been a mentor of mine this past 4 years. He's been able to subject yourself to Skip's truth-telling. Keith was the one who rescued me from turning into a failed or mediocre moderator by point blank telling me in Wye River that I wasn't applying myself. And if I did, that I actually had a chance to become a moderator for our leadership programs. It's been able to observe at close hand Peter's uncommon dedication, one of the most extraordinary people I've ever met, Peter Riley, and I thank you. So the people behind us, the people in this room, and the thing that gives me personal fulfillment, really, and the courage and encouragement to keep trying, is coming back here every summer for my personal renewal. And it's staring down a 7-foot-tall bear by the hotel reception there at 2 o'clock in the morning after a long night of excessive drinking in the company of people such as Abigail. She wasn't pregnant at the time. And you know, it's sharpening my flirtation skills whenever I come back here. It's keeping Peter awake at night when I get people over to come and smoke cigars and argue over pointless issues and raucous laughter until 3 o'clock in the morning. And it is, of course, now finding out during this seminar that I have managed to reduce my risk of physical harm by at least 50% since Ali Mufuruki is now certifiably my body double. And so I head back home tomorrow morning fully renewed, fully recharged for the very hard, very difficult and risky work that lies ahead, but that needs to be done. And I know that whenever I'm asked who is behind you, I can always say, it's my fellow fellows. So thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.